Now I'm currently working on removing the hydraulic pump. The manual says start with the inspection plates. Okay, I've taken this one off where the control lever, or where the power takeoff lever was. That's easy. And I've taken the inspection plate off the other side. And once again, taking plates off is easy. The next step in the manual wasn't so easy. Simple instruction. It just says get your hand through the inspection plate, which is here, and separate the fork from the control yoke down the bottom there. It's just one short sentence in the manual, but the problem is that to get down into there, I can barely get my hand through the opening and down alongside the fork, and when I get my hand down there, I actually can't get enough purchase to pull the yoke apart to remove the control. Now you can also get your fingers up through the bottom. You probably can't see it there, but there's a drain plug under the control yoke. You can get your fingers up, but once again, I can't get enough purchase on this spring here to separate it. Now, luckily, the grey Fergie forum actually addresses this, and I've seen a way of getting that off using a clamp, to try and get a clamp down in there somehow and put some pressure on to help relieve the spring from the yoke. Just can't quite see it down there. So I'll try that next, because I've got to get that off before I can start thinking about dropping the pump out through the bottom of the casing. So I'll just try and position the clamp now and see if that works. Now the clamp didn't quite work. Maybe the clamp was a little bit too big, but looking at it closely, the lever mechanism is slightly different from what's in the manual. In fact, it's got a little bolt here, I'll just in my hand there, which goes into the mechanism there. Now what that appears to do is to add more tension to this spring device here. Now by removing that bolt, you're able to pull this lever out a little bit more. Now I still couldn't get it out with my fingers from the bottom, but what I did was to tie a bit of wire around the spring, grab it here and pull. Now by pulling that, I was actually able to pull it out far enough to remove the control lever down the bottom. So yeah, I finally got that undone. So it's a little bit more complicated than just stick your hands in there and do it, but I think this is a later modification. Now probably it would have been easier if I removed the bolts on both sides, and perhaps that makes the spring even more supple to be able to use your fingers. But this is a 1952 version, so the early versions maybe you could get your hand in there and pull the spring device apart and then remove the control valve, but certainly not on this one. It's just too much tension. So at this stage that's undone, and I'll proceed with removing the pump. I've been stripping the hydraulic pump back on the Ferguson and cleaning it up as I go. The condition of the pump is actually not too bad. When I've cleaned everything up and checked all the parts, all these valves seem fine, the internals of the valve chambers are fine, the pistons, they're not too bad, there's very little scoring on those. The camshaft looks good, no scoring, it's nice and clean. The brass bushes, there's very little movement inside their cages, so really I'm quite pleased with the condition of the main part of the pump itself. The control valve, that was fine, very nice fit in the housing, it wasn't sticking, so it's okay as well. The two problems, one is the condition of the ram itself. Now it does have scores inside the bore, and not only in the bore but also on the piston itself. Let's get it out. There's a few scores around particularly the top part of the piston. Now I'm not too worried about that. This tractor is not actually going to be used as a farm machine. It's just going to be used around the workshop area here. So I'm not too worried about the effects of the scoring on the ram. I mean, it may not hold up to its full extent properly, but you know, that's neither here nor there for the use that I'll have for it. The rings were quite worn, so I've actually ordered a new set of rings, so I'll put a new set of rings in. I'll probably put this piston in the lathe and just make sure there are no burrs where the scoring is. Maybe give it a light, a very fine emery, make sure it's nice and smooth. The bore itself, might put a light hone through that once again, just to make sure there are no raised edges on the scores. But apart from that, that will go back together. The other issue I found with the pump was the amount of rubbish, sludge, even thick paste. Now, it was almost level with the top of this, and no amount of draining the oil would get rid of that. Now, I've seen suggestions about putting diesel into the transmission housing and other forms of spirit to flush things out. Now, that might flush a little bit out, but unless you know the condition of the inside, you may just be wasting your time. And apart from that, what I've found, having pulled all this apart and also having pulled the side of the diff off there, is that there are a lot of parts in this tractor that that they actually don't drain out through the sump plug. So there are captive parts where, you know, if you put some form of spirit in there, it's just going to stay there. It's not going to drain out the drain holes. So the only really good way to clean it is, you know, unfortunately, pull it all apart and clean it. So I've done that, just waiting on some rings and some gaskets, and then I'll reassemble this. It's not overly difficult once you work out which version of the pump you're actually working with, because there are various modifications over its life. This is not the final modification, but it's you know, 1952 tractor, so it's had a few changes from the original. But I think the pump will work quite well, certainly not up to its full potential with the scoring in the ram. That will leak, but the pump being in so good a condition, the pump should compensate for that, certainly while the engine's running anyway. Maybe once the engine's turned off, the Obviously the hydraulics will leak around the ram, and then it'll gradually lower, but that's not a problem for my use.